It could keep you safe. It could keep you from getting shot. It could keep you alive. A mask could.
Not everything is as it seems. And you have to trust the people that come around you, more particularly the time that they come around you. Because people seem to be put in your life in key moments.
People are amazed that there was a job title called Chief of Disguise. And most women I know wish they'd had that job. Sounded like fun. Actually, it was fun. I don't think another intelligence agency in the world devoted the time and the budget to disguise like we do.
It's not so much what they're telling us they did with these masks. It's what they're not telling us they've done with these masks. Also, how long have they been messing with these masks? I believe it's been going on since they've been taking pictures.
Disguise became a form of body armor. In the Spy Museum, we call the mask a 5-second mask. They proved invaluable. You could change your ethnicity. You could change your gender. You could change your nationality. And if you needed to, you could actually become another person. You could change your ethnicity. You could change your gender. You could change your nationality. And if you needed to, you could actually become another person.
You could change your ethnicity. You could change your gender. You could change your nationality. And if you needed to, you could actually become another person.
Now here we are, about to unmask the Beatles. Now these C.I.A. face masks go deep into just the actual face masks. They got prosthetics and all kind of things. But it's about unmasking the fact that these aren't real people.
The Illuminati created the Beatles to control the youth and reshape their personalities using soft drugs. This is also known as the Aquarian Conspiracy. The theory was the brainchild of a former MI6 officer, John Coleman, back in the 1990s. In this theory, the Beatles were jettisoned to stardom with the help of a British organization that studies group behavior called the Tavistock Institute for Human Relations. Many theorists believe that this group had an ulterior motive behind their studies. I don't know, like world domination?
Try to take over the world.
Maybe. But more seriously, engineering the world's culture through pop culture itself. What better way to engineer the world's youth than by using rock music and mind-altering drugs? For starters, the compilation entitled Past Masters is a Masonic term used to describe the former worshipful master of a Masonic lodge.
Now let's all get drunk.
What of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts? Who are all these guys on the album cover? Alright, other Illuminati cultists. You may even recognize a few. Edgar Allan Poe, Bob Dylan, Fred Astaire, H.G. Wells, Marilyn Monroe, Albert Einstein, and many, many more. Quote the Raven nevermore. That was dumb. And what about this album cover? The Beatles, Yesterday and Today. Dismembered babies? Check. Raw meat? Check. Satanic rituals and occult themes? Absolutely. And take a look at this promotional picture from Yellow Submarine. John Lennon flashes the devil's horns. Yep, Illuminati. And there's Paul over here making the Eyes of Horus sign, which is also interpreted as 666. The With the Beatles album cover, with all the Beatles members' faces half shaded, alludes to the Eye of Horus as well. The great part about this is that we're just getting started. Now on to probably the most popular Beatles conspiracy theory. We're just jumping right into this bad boy, guys. Paul is dead.
The Paul is dead conspiracy is definitely the most popular conspiracy surrounding the Beatles. But it's all smoke and mirrors because of people found out in the 60s putting these clues together that something wasn't quite right. And if you watch Paul McCartney is Really Dead, The Last Testament of George Harrison, you're going to see a lot of info, probably the most info in there. They refer to Paul as false Paul or Billy Shears.
That the Beatles never even existed. That they were characters that have been played by many different actors over the years. Did a sinister establishment use body doubles to create a band to control the masses? Is that even a possibility? Height fluctuations from album to album, changing facial features, or even mannerisms. We'll say that this is definitely plausible.
How long do you think Beatlemania will last?
As long as you all keep coming.
The Beatles are great, homie, and we said so. Hey, the Beatles are great. The Beatles are great. They're great.
I love them. I don't care what anybody thinks. I love the Beatles for them, and I'll always love them. Even when I'm 105 and an old grandmother, I'll love them. And Paul McCartney, if you are listening. Adrienne from Brooklyn loves you with all her heart. I love you, Paul, and please come to the window so I can just see you. I saw you smoking before, and I kissed the limousine you looked out of. But I love you, and I want you, Paul. Please look at. And Ringo, you can look at too, because I like you.
This is the machine at work. Without a shadow of a doubt, these people are hypnotized. Yes, there's something in the water. Don't watch too much of your television, and don't listen to songs too many times in a row. Much like I talked about before, when you're on the internet, you could be arguing with an agent. There's a bunch of agents on the internet, and what they'll do is social engineering. Back then, they had reporters that was down with them. They had police that was down with them. They had foots on ground. They're gonna find the right person to interview almost every time, because the right person is gonna be someone who's down with them.
What's a woman's opinion of the Beatles? A young woman's opinion, that is.
I think they're sharp. Just gorgeous. He's gorgeous. He's got a beautiful nose. Ringo has a sexy nose.
We were told as soon as we got here last night by the police, don't look out of the windows and don't wave. And if we do that, then we get the police chief coming up and saying, well, we're finished, boys. And he goes away and he won't look after us, so we can't do anything.
Have you tried to sneak into the hotel?
Yes, we were in the hotel.
How far in did you get?
12th floor.
Well, the Domenico was not like that. We came here at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 to see them, and all they do is push you farther and farther away, and then they don't even let you see them.
Then you're sick?
Yes.
Have you ever been this crazy about any other entertainer?
No, and that's what's so amazing. We don't know why we're like this.
There are many conspiracies about the Beatles. One of them is that the Illuminati, as a part of a plot to introduce American youngsters to drugs. The theory known as the Currian conspiracy was started by former M16 officer John Coleman in the 1990s. One thing I noticed about these CIA stars, there are thousands of conspiracies surrounding them. Now, Coleman claimed that the band's success took off with help from Tavistock Institute for Human Relations, a British organization which studies group behavior, but which conspiracy theorists believe this group works with many other groups across the world. They say the music storm from the Beatles that hit America was Illuminati driven, taking control of education for the sole purpose to utterly destroy it. Coleman claimed the masterminds of the plot planned to use rock music and drugs to rebel against the status quo, thus undermining and eventually destroying the family unit. Now, if you look at the promotion for the Yellow Submarine, John Lennon is indeed flashing the demon horns associated with the mysterious group, and Paul is making the 666 Eye of Horus hand sign. The claim isn't without foundation. When you look over and over into the Beatles, what you find is these symbolic, like they're deep, even inside the music, the backwards massing and all that, they are deep into symbolic. A shocking cover of Yesterday and Today album shows John, Paul, George, and Ringo with dismembered baby dolls. Which, come on, who's gonna have dismembered baby dolls with chopped up red meat all around them? And it's just some madness going on out here, y'all. And one site claims the iconic Sgt. Pepper cover includes a host of Illuminati stooges. And we already showed you that. But sometimes you gotta show more than just one source. They also claim quotes from the group prove they are part of the Illuminati conspiracy to replace Christianity. In 1963, Paul McCartney said Christianity doesn't fit in my life. 3 years later, John Lennon told Newskeep Christianity will go, it will vanish and shrink. I need argue not about this. I'm right and it will be proven right. Now these people who put this together, who did all this studying and figured out Paul is dead, they did more research, they start figuring out, okay, well all of them look like they've been replaced. It's the same thing that happened with MJ. This is a corporate, like Coca-Cola, like William Shakespeare.
Now, I only need basic skills to prove once and for all that these are not the same Beatles. Just, mostly for the naysayers, for the people who just won't accept the fact that these are two totally different bands that we're dealing with. Why don't we start? Let's just start with John Lennon.
Now I'll go on record as saying I don't believe that these are the two same people. One facial structure looks totally different, and one looks way older than the other one. I mean like 15 years older. The one on the right looks like he's just old as hell. And you gotta think about it. If these people are being played by older people, we gotta start thinking of a bigger pedophile ring. Because these guys was running around having sex with titty boppers. So you have to think about what's really going on here. You gotta think deeper than what a normal person can think. Maybe go back and check out some of my older videos and maybe you can understand exactly what is going on here. These are not the same people. You know, they've got that fake hair in there. The nose ain't the same. He's covering up the ears in almost all his pictures. But you have to really think about this. John Lennon on one side, people could say, okay, well, you gotta remember, John Lennon, started in 66 and ended in 80. If you go, like I showed you earlier, from 66 to 67, there was a huge difference where they looked way older. All of a sudden, they're sporting these big mustaches, these big old beards. And that was before people started doing that like that, man. 60s was shave cut. And they ushered in a lot. They ushered in a lot to society. These ain't the same people. Look how old this guy on the left looks. That man looked like he's about 46 or something. They ain't the same people. These people like to play God, but they do a lousy job at it. You pay all this big money to go see a group. You got some guys who look similar. You never even see them in real life, and I will contest to you, I've met people I've seen on TV that look different. I'll say that, but this is ridiculous.
Okay, now Sgt. Pepper, 1966, right? Now Revolver, the Beatles' last album was 1966. Yeah, or 65. Whether it's 1 year or the same year, people don't change this fucking drastically. I don't care if you're Michael goddamn Jackson, even though that story is very, very, very suspicious.
He hit it right on the nail with the Michael Jackson. That's the last face mask video I did. If you haven't seen C.I.A. face mask Michael Jackson, go check that out.
There's no way that these are the same people. Now, for all the people out there who keep denying the fact that, hey, it's possible that the Beatles could have been replaced. guys, they won't even think of it as a slight possibility.
No, you know, like I say, for me, I always feel ordinary. There are two Paul McCartneys. The one inside me is the one I always was when I was a little kid in school. That's still who I am. And then there's a very famous one. And he is the one I become when I go on stage.
There are two Paul McCartneys. The one inside me is the one I always was when I was a little kid in school. That's still who I am. And then there's a very famous one. And he is the one I become when I go on stage.
There are two Paul McCartneys. The one inside me is the one I always was when I was a little kid in school. That's still who I am. And then there's a very famous one. And he is the one I become when I go on stage.
And I came across just the clip today about Billy writing backwards. And then the clip in the book about being mentored by Aleister Crowley, and I was like, oh, like I missed that the first time around. But again, he's openly saying that, and like you said with Magical Mystery Tour, if I know the occult, I understand that movie. When Billy is openly saying that, you understand exactly what he's saying.
This one here was deep into witchcraft. The industry is ran off of this man's sayings, off of this man's thoughts, off of this man's philosophy. Secret society moved together, pushed the masses.
Yeah, it's the occult law of reversal, and that's out of Crowley's book, the Book of the Law.
The one thing you gotta remember about Lucifer is he always tries to mimic God. He does a horrible job at it. These devils can't do nothing the Most High does, and this is why they're always ousted. It's only a matter of time for what they do comes to light. That's the issue with these devils. They want to be God. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation of the further side of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High, to have absolute power over men and women's lives. That's what this is about.
And in memoirs, Billy tells us in the Blue version that he was mentored by Aleister Crowley in his early years. So yes, so everything is out there, Vince. I mean, it's hidden in plain sight. And as I've said so many times, Billy has been dropping clues since day one. When people say, "Oh, Billy's a liar. He's a deceiver." Well, he's only a liar and a deceiver if you don't understand the signs and symbols and what it is that he's putting out there.
Now, the Beatles was the first credited with backwards massing, with messages. But they weren't the last. The Beatles, in a lot of ways, was a template of stars to come, much like Elvis was a single star to come. Let's go.
It's like Brian Ray, who's his current guitar player. I put a video up maybe about a week ago or so, and he was being interviewed, and he had said that he's the best Paul McCartney ever, or something to that effect. So you're watching that and you're listening to it, and the average person, it goes over their head. But once you understand about masterful speaking, where they can tell you the truth, but they kind of encode it, camouflage it in a way. The first question you ask yourself is, he's the best Paul McCartney ever. Well, isn't there only one Paul McCartney? So that's a very strange thing to say.
Something is not quite right with the Beatles. Now, if you study their rise, you study their style, you study their basicness, their normalness, there has to be something behind this group deeper than just music. Cause it ain't no music to make people jump up and scream out of their seats, let me tell you.
And the words are coming from his mouth. But then we fast forward to the Rubber Soul and the success. And I love the one clip you have. Explain to everybody what the finger over the mouth means, because you could explain that much better than me.
Okay, so in Freemasonry, they have this symbolism. So when you see a Freemason do this, that's the symbol for tell no secrets. I call it the hush symbolism, like hush, quiet. And so there was an interview that was in a DVD, which was about George Martin. It's called Produced by George Martin, and I watched that DVD, And so he was being interviewed by Howard Goodall. And Howard is a composer himself. He's a broadcaster and composer. He's very accomplished. And so Mr. Goodall, during that interview, was asking George some questions. And then he says, I have to ask you this one question. And so George Martin says, okay, yeah, no problem. And so Mr. Goodall starts asking about the composition and the complexities of songs like Yesterday, Eleanor Rigby, Blackbird. And it's interesting. If you watch that clip closely, it's as if when Mr. Goodall asked George Martin that question, I don't think George Martin was expecting that question. Because if you notice, Vince, he straightens up in his chair. George is sitting there, Howard asks him the question, and then George straightens up. And it's almost like, whoa. And the problem with Mr. Goodall asking that question is because he's a composer. He's a formally trained musician and composer. And so when that comes from a peer and they're asking that question, that's questioning the official narrative. And so when Mr. Goodall was playing giving some examples of how the songs were constructed, remember he was playing the piano, giving some brief examples, George does this. So he's listening to Mr. Goodall, and he still has his finger up like this. And then once Mr. Goodall finishes explaining his, getting through his question and giving his examples on the piano, George then does what he does best, which is he directs the conversation, the answer back to John and Paul. He says, oh no, they wrote it. They really did. They really did. And if I had wrote them, I would have made a lot of money. And then I jumped at the clip where George Martin then says he wrote the melody line to Michelle. He says that was his composition.
Quincy Jones is not a fan of the Beatles? Not at all. Interesting article from Vulture. He basically told them they were the worst musicians in the world, the Beatles. They were no playing mother blankety blanks. Paul McCartney was the worst bass player I ever heard. Wow. And Ringo Starr, don't even talk about it. I mean, at least he speaks his mind. He was working on Love Is a Many Splendid Thing from Ringo's 1970 album, he recalls, and that Ringo was having problems with this 4-bar thing with George Martin in the studio. And I guess Quincy thought this was an easy thing, and they made Ringo go out and have some fish and chips and a beer, and they called in a jazz drummer to basically do it while he was out. Ringo comes back, tries it one more time, and listens to it, and he says, well, that sounded pretty good, but it was Ronnie Verrell, the jazz drummer. And I mean, he's cutting. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, and Ringo's been criticized for his drumming in the past.
George Martin pulls no punches. And he says on several occasions, like, they were not very good. And again, I think a lot of people know this, but we got to go back to the Cavern and the early days. They were a cover band.
Right.
They were a cover band, but there were so many instances and interviews that you pulled out early on where he basically said he saw nothing in them.
So just for a recap, they're not good musicians. They don't write their own music. What do they do? This man said that he didn't think they had any talent. There was nothing to them. So what do these people do? Who are they? Why are these little girls falling out all over themselves? It's because there's something in that music.
So when that happened, again, it's when you're able to decode the signs and symbols, and you don't have to know all of them. I mean, just the basic ones. Whenever you see this, that just means, we're going to keep silent, keep quiet. We're not going to reveal any secrets. When he did that during that particular segment of the presentation, when Mr. Goodall was asking him the question about those songs, that immediately said to me that the Beatles, John and Paul specifically, did not write those songs. Okay, that's how I interpreted it.
Why would he then early on pull no punches about them not being good musicians? And I mean, wouldn't from the get-go he build these guys up to be more than they actually were?
Yeah, so I think what happened was, and again, this is just a guess because it is kind of weird. In the beginning, he's telling us that he didn't like the music. He said he thought the music was rubbish.
Yeah.
His words, right?
Yeah.
That they didn't have much behind them. And basically he had said, I don't know what I'm going to do with these guys. He was kind of looking at a lead, and he said none of them stands above the others. So basically what he's saying is, I've got an equal lot of these 4 guys here, and what do I do with them? And then he said, I'll just take them on as a band, right? So I think what happened, and again, this is just me kind of reading into it. I think initially, when the Beatles were presented to him, George didn't want anything to do with them, because that wasn't. George is an accomplished musician, arranger, composer, and he's thinking, what am I going to do with this? And Tavistock had a whole pool of these bands, around, and what they do is they have a pool of resource that they pull from. The Rolling Stones came from the same pool, by the way. The Stones are also a creation of Tavistock, as is the Who and the rest of them.
The world was induced by a very sensitive energy. They're talking about if you're too bearish, it's toxic now. What you're seeing going on right now is why you had the movement in the 60s and 70s in music. Because a lot of those men had a real female energy, your Mick Jaggers, and they weren't as manly as the other singers of the day. Well, if you got young boys growing up idolizing Mick Jagger, you got yourself a real problem on your hands.
I think what happened was people above George Martin said, okay, look, that's interesting that you don't like them, George, but they're the guys.
They're the chosen ones.
They're the ones that we're going to push forward with, okay? So I can appreciate the fact that this is going to be a lot of work on your part. Right? But you have to go do this.
Yeah.
And because even in the book, I think it was on page 351 of Memoirs, Billy mentions that the word came from a couple of rungs above George Martin.
Yeah.
You see? So even though Memoirs does not specifically question who wrote the music, there are little clues hidden inside Memoirs that will help you to validate what I did as an example. Right? So it's neither denying or confirming in Memoirs. But once you kind of grab onto a specific thread and you follow it, you find that, oh, you know what? I think perhaps this is what I'm being told in the book.
There is more than one way to unmask a man, as there is more than one way to unmask a band. Now, if you pay attention to these people, I believe there's prosthetics involved. I believe there's plastic surgery involved. And there could be some level of masks involved. Because when it comes down to it, people want to break from who they are and they want to be able to take that mask off. But I've counted at least 9 different Beatles that I've found so far. Watch what you're listening to and never overindulge.
Let's talk. I want to talk Smoking Gun now. You know, to me, and I'm curious to hear your answer to this, Mike. To me, you know, doing all the research, reading the Hugh Harriet book. I mean, everything I've been seeing since I'm a 7-year-old kid. To me, the Smoking Gun in the Paul is dead theory. The Smoking Gun to me is the arrest in Japan.
Yeah.
And then and the fingerprints not matching up, and Billy thought gigs up, man, like gigs up. That to me is the Smoking Gun. Here, like clearly, and I want you to, you know, go into this. The Mercy Beat article in 1962.
That's a smoking gun.
If this happened in 1962, what would make you think it didn't happen in 63, in 64, in 65, in 66? Listen, Mike, you and I both listen to a lot of music. You are a musician. You listen to a lot more than me. But I could tell you in my whole life of listening to music, even before you put together this unbelievable presentation, there is not one musical group out there, not one, that literally changed their style year after year after year after year, like they were 2, 3, 4 totally different bands. Not one.
The Beatles was the great experiment, which all bands would be template with after. They learned what to do, they learned what not to do. And changing your music every album is definitely a mistake. It brings up red flags.
Zeppelin sounded like Zeppelin. Who sounded like who? Stones still sound like the Stones. Pink Floyd, Simon and Garfunkel. I'm a writer. There is a way I write. When I write something, you know it's Vince Russo. This was completely different from the early albums. Please, Please Me. Then we went into the Help Brothers Soul Revolver stage. Then all of a sudden, Sgt. Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour. Then we go to the White Album. Like, to think this is the same style of these same 4 individuals, there's no way, no how.
It isn't a secret, not hard to tell at all what they were doing. They got people hooked with the first 2 pop albums with the hidden messages in it to get it in everybody's household. Then they brought the psychedelic and drug aspect to music, which already immediately entered in people's homes without even being thought of as something bad. Though there were signs.
The Beatles arrived in Japan today as their tour of the Far East continues. Across the Pacific in the United States, a furor is developing over comments John Lennon made. Quote, "Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink. We're more popular than Jesus." Unquote.
This was strategically done. They understood the backlash that was going to come. They understood that putting the parents against the kids was going to leave some people who felt like what their parents was doing wasn't cool to just gravitate towards the Beatles and what they were talking about. So there was a lot of backlash coming from elders and coming from kids who actually respect their parents. But a lot of the kids, they still got, and they forgot about this, and they still supported the Beatles and got more hidden deadly messages from them.
Here in Tokyo, violence broke out when right-wing fanatics demonstrated against the Beatles and their effect on Japanese youth.
This is Tommy Charles. If you, as an American teenager, are offended by statements from a group of foreign singers which strike at the very basis of our existence as God-fearing, patriotic citizens, then we urge you to take your Beatle records, pictures, and souvenirs to the pickup points about to be named. And on the night of the Beatles' appearance in Memphis, August 19th, they will be destroyed in a huge public bonfire at a place to be named soon. Stay tuned to Wacky for further development.
But talk about that smoking gun in 1962, where we're told.
Yeah, so in the presentation, and I can't, I'll give credit to one of my friends who sent this to me. I won't mention him by name because some folks don't want me to mention their names, but they sent me this this clip, an image of a Mercy Beat publication from, I think it was August, September of 1962. And in it was an article about the Beatles. And it was an article announcing that Pete Best left the group and Ringo Starr was the new drummer. And the Beatles were flying to London to record with EMI, and that the songs were specifically written for them and given to them by their producer, George Martin. Okay, so it doesn't say that they wrote their own songs. It said that the songs were specifically written for them.
Now, if these are agents and they're running around here messing with little girls and they're running around here doing concerts, there has to be something illegal, impersonating a person, making it seem as if you're something you're not. You also got to remember, John Lennon said the Beatles meant more to the world than Christ. This is who you let into your mind.
I just said they are having more influence on kids and things than anything else, including Jesus. But I said it in that way, which is the wrong way.
Well, some teenagers have repeated your statements that the Beatles, I like the Beatles more than Jesus Christ. What do you think about that?
Well, originally I was pointing out that fact in reference to England, that we meant more to kids than Jesus did, or religion at that time.
There are pedophiles amongst the music business, like there's pedophiles amongst the Hollywood business. Have you ever heard the story of the two Corys? Then you need to go check that out. It was said that the Beatles allegedly were affiliated with notorious gangster Cray twins and new pedophile Lord Robert Boothby and Tom Draberge. The Beatles attended the Cray gay orgy parties and used their position of celebrities to lure boys to the parties, allegedly. Now, why are so many of these people hanging around the Beatles? The Beatles' publicist, Max Clifford, was jailed for 8 accounts of indecent assault on girls and women. The publicist, convicted sex offender Chris Dennen, was the Beatles' studio engineer. He spent 4 decades in and out of prison for abusing boys. I mean, why are these type of people surrounding the Beatles or any form of success that has to do with entertainment? These people are touching underage kids. A lot of them are touching children. Like, my goodness. I don't care if she's 17. If you a grown man, get a grown woman. You know, because you ain't gonna survive it with mine, touching one of mine. Jonathan Key was jailed for 7 years for pedophilia. Come on, man. He abused young boys. The Beatles knew him. I mean, all around these people. Another DJ's sentenced to 25 years. So you gotta know that when you're dealing with entertainment, you have to know that independent is the way to go. But other than that, watch what you're listening to, and watch what you're letting your kids listen to. Watch what you're watching and what you're letting your kids watch. Me personally, I don't watch a lot of TV at all. Like, I do a lot of work. I'm working, I'm doing documentaries, I'm working on music, and I'm praying, I'm studying, but you have to wonder why there aren't harder, stiff penalties for these damn devils who are messing with children. And it goes on, and I don't know if they're gonna try to put this video down, but man, there's pedophilia stuff that's going on. There's pedophilia stuff that's going on amongst these heathen nations. It has to be put to an end, because it's going to start trickling down, as it has started trickling down into our community. So it says this Confetti pedophile glam rocker used his rocker status to molest girls. Cliff Richard, this stuff is just pitiful, man. It's happening to girls and it's happening to boys. They're both being molested. And just don't think, this is back in the 60s, man, all through time, especially dealing with the Edomite nations. They've always been on that, messing with little kids. That's something we ain't do. We ain't never did that. Says, is there something bigger at work here that would make these DJs be pedophiles and even murderers? I mean, goodness, this is just madness. It's time to wake up, because judgment is close, people. For a lot of us, judgment is close. It's the deception on generation after generation of generation. Like I exposed them putting acid and inducing people with these drugs. They're listening to this music and their mindset is changing. It's altering their thought process. If you really love a song, you listen to that song night and day. It becomes of you. You ever have a song come on and it brings you back to that feeling, that thought you had, what you was doing? It doesn't happen every time, but if you haven't heard a song in a while and it comes on, it takes you back to that moment, that time. So just for a recap, these Beatles aren't a real group. A group meaning came up together and came together on their own. C.I.A. face mask, the Beatles.